You were born in one of Barcelona's suburbs. You didn't grow up in luxury houses, but in a small home where the smell of the sea was always present. Your family was not rich. Sometimes, even making it to the end of the month was difficult. Your father was a fisherman. Every morning, before the sun rose, he would set out to sea and return hours later, exhausted. From a very young age, you started helping him. As soon as school ended, you would run to the shore, carry crates, gather the nets, and work beside your father at the end of the day. Life was not easy, but back then, you weren't even aware of it because the most important thing for you was being able to help your family. One day, while you were walking home from school, something happened that would change everything. As you walked through the narrow streets, you heard shouting from afar. A group of kids were playing football. Just as you were passing by them, the ball flew hard into the air and started coming toward you. As a reflex, you stretched out your foot. The ball landed perfectly on your foot. It was as if it had been waiting for you for a long time. The kids looked at you in amazement. "Do it again," they said. You started juggling the ball, then again and again. That day, you touched a football for the first time. But what happened that day was much more than that, because that ball had not come to your foot that day. It had entered your life. From that day on, you played football every chance you got. In the streets, in schoolyards, on the beach, even sometimes using fish crates as goalposts. Hours passed, but you didn't notice because when you were on the field, all your problems flew away. Poverty, tiredness, difficulties, they all disappeared for a few seconds. Football gave you a sense of freedom. As the years passed, your talent began to be noticed by everyone. The kids in the neighborhood fought to pick you for their team, and coaches came to watch you. One day, you received the most important news of your life. Barcelona Youth Academy trials. This was a huge chance for you. Maybe the only opportunity that would change your life. When the day of the trials arrived, your heart was beating as if it would burst out of your chest. You stepped onto the field. You were scared, but your dreams were on the field with you too. As the minutes passed and every time the ball came to your feet, you felt freer. It was as if you had been waiting for this moment for years. A few days later, the phone rang. Barcelona had selected you for their youth academy. At that moment, a new journey began. One that represented not only you, but also your family, your friends, and all the dreams you had built. On the first day you entered Barcelona's facilities, you understood that your life had changed. But in reality, everything was only just beginning. As you walked through the corridors of La Masia, there were hundreds of young players around you, just like you. Everyone had one dream: to become Barcelona's new star. You were one of them too. However, there was one more thing that made you different. No matter how devoted a Barcelona fan you were, since your childhood, you had admired one footballer: Cristiano Ronaldo. His poster was hanging on the wall of your room. Every night before going to sleep, you would look at it and make a promise to yourself. One day, I will be like him. As the training sessions continued, you began to realize how high the level was. Being the best player in the streets was one thing. Being here was something else. One day, during training, a kid who seemed even more talented than you caught your attention. The ball seemed glued to his foot. He was passing his opponents as if they didn't even exist. Watching him was enjoyable. At the end of training, you went up to him. Curious, you asked, "By the way, what was your name?" The kid smiled. "Hello, I'm Lamine Yamal." That day, you didn't know that this name would one day become one of the names the whole world would hear. At first, It was an ordinary friendship. You trained together, ate together, and talked about your dreams. Months passed, then years. Both of you continued rising through Barcelona's youth academy. You grew up together. You won together. You dreamed together. And finally, the day you had been waiting for arrived. Barcelona's first team had secured the championship, and toward the end of the season, the coach wanted to give young players a chance and called you up to the first team. Your childhood dream was coming true. Your first official match. At Camp Nou, in front of thousands of fans, as you looked at your jersey in the dressing room, your hands were trembling. Because you had worked for years for this. When you stepped onto the pitch, your heart was beating like crazy. In front of you was a team from the lower ranks. The match began. As the minutes passed, everything felt like a dream. Then the first goal came. Lamine scored, then another one, then another. A hat trick. The stadium was collapsing, but you had not stayed idle either. You made one assist. Barcelona won the match 4-0. At the end of the match, the fans had gone crazy. But the next day, you noticed something. Newspapers, social media, television programs, everyone was talking about only one name, Lamine Yamal, the new superstar, the new Messi, the new phenomenon. You watched the news for hours, but almost nowhere was anyone talking about you. It was as if you had never played in that match. At first you didn't care. After all, he was your friend. You should have been happy for him. But as the days passed, that feeling began to change. Lamine in every interview. Lamine in every headline. Lamine in every compliment. And you, the other kid left in the background. When a few months had passed, everything became even worse. An unfortunate injury you suffered during a match kept you away from the fields. The doctor's decision was harsh. 6 months. You would not be able to play football for exactly 6 months. This was the hardest period you had ever gone through in your life. You watched the training sessions from the stands. You watched your teammates on television. And most of all, you watched Lamine's rise. A new headline every week. A new compliment every week. A new record every week. Meanwhile, you were in the rehabilitation center. When you returned after 6 months, everything had changed. You were not as fast as before. You were not as confident as before. You were struggling to get a chance to wear the jersey. The substitutes bench had become your new home. The anger inside you began to grow. No one could see it, but you could feel it. You thought that the effort you had given for years was being ignored. And one night, your phone rang. You didn't recognize the number. You answered the call. A calm and charismatic voice came from the other side. "Hello, son, I'm Florentino Perez." For a moment, your breath stopped. The president of Real Madrid was calling you. Perez continued speaking. "We are watching you here. We see your talents, and we believe we can give you the value you deserve." At that moment, you looked at the Cristiano Ronaldo poster in your room. The club of the man you had admired since childhood was calling you, and the hardest decision of your life was standing right in front of you. When the transfer news was announced, the football world was almost shaken. The young star who had grown up in Barcelona's academy was going to Real Madrid. Social media had exploded. Some were calling you a traitor, while others were saying you were brave. But you weren't listening to any of them. Because since your childhood, you had another dream. When you entered the dressing room of Santiago Bernabéu for the first time, your eyes were fixed on the jerseys on the wall. And finally, you chose the number you wanted. 7. Cristiano Ronaldo's number. The number of the man whose poster you had grown up looking at in your childhood was now on your back. At that moment, you made a promise to yourself. You would honor this jersey. In the first weeks, adapting was not easy. New team, new city, new pressures. But after a short time, you met another star around your age in the team, Arda Güler. Both of you were young. Both of you were trying to prove yourselves. Both of you were dreaming big. Over time, you became not only teammates, but close friends. After training sessions, you did extra work, watched matches together, and talked about the future. Your chemistry on the field was increasing with each passing day. The fans had started giving you new nicknames. Bernabeu was standing up for you every week. However, on the other side, Barcelona was not stopping. Led by Lamine Yamal, they were also continuing to grow. Throughout the league, the two teams followed each other closely. One week you were going ahead. One week they were becoming the leader. After months of struggle, everything came down to the final match, El Clásico. And on top of that, at Camp Nou, the winner would become champion. When the bus approached the stadium, you saw the crowd outside. Thousands of Barcelona fans were waiting for you. The people who had once applauded you were now looking at you with anger. The moment you got off the bus, a deafening sound rose. Boos, whistles, insults. It was as if the whole stadium was against you. For the first time, you were feeling such great pressure. When the match started, your mind was not on the field. Every time you received the ball, the sounds from the stands grew louder. You made simple passing mistakes. You lost the ball. You couldn't play like yourself. Arda tried to motivate you. But that day, nothing was working. Barcelona, on the other hand, made no mistakes. When the final whistle blew, the scoreboard showed the painful truth. Barcelona had won, and they had become champions. While Camp Nou was collapsing with joy, you were sitting silently on the grass. As Lamine Yamal lifted the trophy, your eyes met. Two kids who had once dreamed in the same academy were now the heroes of different stories. That season ended, but the nightmare did not. The next season, Barcelona became champions again. The season after that, Barcelona again. For exactly 2 years in a row, they were at the top of Spain. Real Madrid, despite constantly coming close, could not win the league. Lamine was still in the headlines, and you still felt incomplete. Finally, the calendars showed the year 2026. Preparations for the new season had begun. One morning, you arrived at the training facility before everyone else. You stepped onto the empty field. You took a deep breath. Then you spoke quietly to yourself. Enough is enough. This year, everything will change. This year, I will not run away. This year, I will not give up. This year, I will win every trophy with Real Madrid. And at that moment, the biggest season of your life had begun. When the 2025 to 2026 season began, you were different now. You were not angry like before. You were not a kid trying to prove himself like before. Now you knew who you were, and you were ready to show it to the whole world. From the first week of the season, you were almost unstoppable. You played better in every match and contributed more to the score every week. Most importantly, you were no longer alone. The bond you had built with Arda Güler had reflected onto the pitch as well. You could understand each other without even thinking. You saw the pass he couldn't see, and he felt the run you were going to make before you even made it. Bernabeu admired your chemistry every week. Newspapers had started showing you as Europe's most dangerous young duo. As the season progressed, Real Madrid rose, but Barcelona was not stopping either. Led by Lamine Yamal, they were also winning. And with 3 matches left before the end of the league, fate brought you face to face once again. The points were equal. The next match was El Clásico. The winning team would gain a huge advantage on the road to the championship. And on top of that, the match was at Camp Nou again. The stands that had once booed you, the stadium you had once feared, but this time you felt different. This time you did not want to run away. When the match began, both teams were playing perfectly. Every ball was being fought for, and every position felt like a battle. As the minutes passed, the score was still 0-0. The final minutes had arrived, and then that moment came. Arda received the ball in midfield. He lifted his head. He saw you and sent a perfect long ball. The ball was gliding through the air. It was as if time had slowed down. The sounds in the stadium disappeared. The fans disappeared. Everything disappeared. Only you and the ball remained. There was only one thing going through your mind at that moment. This time, I will not miss. This time, I will not be afraid. This time, I will become champion. You controlled the ball perfectly. The defender came to make a move. But you were no longer afraid. You took the ball in front of you. You pulled your left foot back, and the moment you struck it, you felt that it would be a goal. The ball flew toward the top right corner. The goalkeeper stretched, but he couldn't reach it. Goal. Camp Nou was buried in silence. The score was 1-0. While your teammates were running toward you, you stayed where you were for a few seconds. The last 3 years were passing before your eyes. The boos, the criticism, the injury, the substitutes bench, the anger, the jealousy. But at the same time, you realized one more thing. The anger Barcelona fans had toward you was not hatred. It was actually love. Because they had seen you as one of their own children. Because they had expectations from you. Because they had believed in you. And you had left them. After the goal, you looked at the stands. You raised both hands into the air and did not celebrate. You only lowered your head silently, as if apologizing. Camp Nou understood this. For the first time, they did not boo you. The match ended. Real Madrid had won 1-0. While the players were celebrating, you went directly to Lamine Yamal, to the friend you had once dreamed with at La Masia. You shook his hand. You hugged him and quietly said, "You had a great season." Lamine smiled. So did you. At that moment, there was rivalry, but there was no hostility. You made no mistakes in the next 2 matches as well. And finally, the moment you had been waiting for years arrived. Real Madrid had become the champion of Spain. As you lifted the trophy at Bernabeu, the burden you had carried for years was being lifted from your shoulders. The season was not over yet, because there was one final obstacle ahead of you, the Champions League final. The opponent was PSG. The eyes of the world were on you. When the final night arrived, there was no fear. There was only belief. And at the end of 90 minutes, you managed to climb to the top of Europe. Real Madrid was the Champions League champion, from Bernabeu to Camp Nou, from the substitutes bench to the top of Europe. The journey seemed complete. But the biggest goal was still ahead of you. A few days after the celebrations ended, a notification came to your phone. The Spain national team preliminary squad had been announced. You looked at the screen. Your heart began to race, because the dream you had carried since childhood was now only one step away. The 2026 FIFA World Cup and the Spain national team. Now it was time for fate's final decision. The 2026 FIFA World Cup had begun. The eyes of the whole world were on America, but one team in particular was drawing attention: Spain, young, talented, brave, and hungry. According to many experts, you were one of the biggest favorites to win the trophy. Among the stars of the team, you and Lamine Yamal stood out. Two kids who had once played in the same academy were now on the biggest stage in the world. The group stage went as expected. Your opponents were struggling to stand against you. Lamine's talent and your determination had made Spain unstoppable. You finished the group as leaders. You also passed the round of 16 comfortably. Now the target was the quarter-final. Opponent: Turkey. On match day, when you looked at the opposing squad in the dressing room, you saw a familiar name: Arda Güler. This time, he was not your teammate, he was your opponent. A few meters beside you, Lamine Yamal was sitting. The kid who had been your opponent just a few matches ago was now your teammate. At that moment, everything you had experienced for years passed before your eyes. Barcelona, Real Madrid, jealousies, successes, defeats. And in the end, you realized something. Football was not just about winning. Football was not just about trophies. What mattered was enjoying yourself on the pitch, respecting your opponent, and enjoying this journey. The referee blew the whistle. The match began. Turkey was playing much better than expected. As the minutes passed, they started putting pressure on you, and eventually, they won a free kick. Arda Güler stepped up to take it. A perfect shot. The ball went over the wall and into the net. 1-0. Turkey was ahead. As Arda celebrated, you smiled involuntarily. The teammate you had dreamed with at Bernabeu had now scored against you in a World Cup quarter-final. As the match went on, time was running out. The minutes were slipping away. The score was still 1-0. The final half hour had arrived. Someone had to take responsibility. And that moment came. The ball fell in front of Lamine Yamal just outside the penalty area. One touch, one shot. Goal, 1-1. The Spain stands rose to their feet. Once upon a time, the jealousy inside you would have bothered you, but now you felt different. You had not scored the goal, but you were as happy as if you had scored it yourself. Because now the team was winning, and that was enough for you. The final minutes of the match had arrived. Everyone was expecting extra time. Then the ball came to you in midfield. One opponent came towards you. You passed him. A second opponent came. You passed him too. The stadium rose to its feet. The defense was beginning to open up. Right at that moment, you saw the run. Lamine. Without thinking, you released the pass. Perfect timing. Perfect angle. Perfect pass. Lamine received the ball. He was one-on-one with the goalkeeper. And goal. 2-1. Spain had taken the lead. This time, you were the first person to run in celebration. You hugged Lamine. Because that goal actually belonged to both of you. It had been created together. When the final whistle blew, everyone collapsed to the ground. No matter how much you had struggled, you had done it. Spain was in the semi-final. After the celebrations ended, you went directly to Arda. You shook his hand. Then you hugged him and said, "You played great." Arda smiled. Reached the final. And you parted ways. In the semi-final, the opponent was France. They had Mbappé and a squad full of stars. But this World Cup was your story. Spain won and reached the final. Now there was only one match left. That night, you gathered as a team to watch the other semi-final. England versus Portugal. The eyes of the world were on this match, but your eyes were searching for only one person: Cristiano Ronaldo. The man you had admired since childhood. The poster on the wall of your room. The owner of the number 7 you carried on your back. He was playing in the World Cup for the last time. He was 40 years old, but he was still on the pitch. He was still fighting. You watched the entire match while holding your breath. The minutes passed. Then one moment came. Cristiano rose in the penalty area. He struck the ball. Goal. Portugal had taken a 1-0 lead. The score did not change by the end of the match. Portugal had reached the final. While your teammates were celebrating, you kept looking at the screen. You couldn't believe it. The man whose poster you had looked at for years would be standing against you in the World Cup final. On one side, you on one side, Cristiano Ronaldo. On one side, the future. On one side, the legend, and the most magnificent trophy in the world. Fate had brought you face to face with a legend in the final, the World Cup final, the biggest stage in football. Millions of people were in front of their screens, and thousands of fans were in the stadium. But you heard none of them. You heard nothing except the beating of your heart. Match day had arrived. In the dressing room, everyone was silent. No one was speaking, because everyone knew the importance of what they held in their hands. A few minutes later, you came out of the tunnel and started walking onto the pitch. And at that moment, you saw him. He was standing at the front. The captain's armband was on his arm. He was holding his head high. The man whose poster you had looked at for years. Cristiano Ronaldo. For a moment, you went back to your childhood, to your small room, to the posters on your wall, to the dreams you had built. And now, he was standing in front of you in the World Cup final. The teams stepped onto the pitch. The national anthems were sung. The stadium was almost shaking. The referee came to the center spot and blew his whistle. The final had begun. From the first minutes, both teams were playing perfectly. Portugal was not sitting back, and Spain was not surrendering either. Every ball was being fought for. As the minutes passed, the match became even tougher. Then a moment you did not want happened. You received the ball in midfield. You were trying to move forward, but with one mistake, you lost the ball. The ball got away from your foot. Portugal won it. Suddenly, a counterattack began. Bruno Fernandes lifted his head and sent a perfect long ball. The ball came directly to Cristiano Ronaldo. One touch, one shot, goal. Portugal had taken a 1-0 lead. The Portuguese side of the stadium was crying with joy. But you froze where you stood. You couldn't believe it. This was your mistake. And the person who scored the goal was Cristiano Ronaldo. For years, you had wanted to be like him. But now, because of his goal, you were losing the World Cup. You lowered your head. For a moment, you thought everything was over. But then you saw someone in the distance. Lamine Yamal. No matter what the score was, he kept running. He kept fighting. He was not giving up. At that moment, you realized something. You had to stop thinking. You had to leave regret behind. You had to stay on the pitch. You had to fight. The minutes began to pass quickly. The final 10 minutes had arrived. Portugal was still ahead, and time was running out. But then an opportunity came. Yamal received the ball on the left wing. He passed his opponent. He passed him once again. He was approaching the penalty area, and you had already started running. You were sprinting with all your strength. You entered the penalty area. Yamal lifted his head. He saw you, and sent a perfect low cross. The ball came exactly where you wanted it. You didn't think. You didn't wait. You struck it first time. A 1-second silence. Then, goal! The ball had gone into the net. 1-1. The stadium was almost collapsing. The Spain fans had gone crazy. Your teammates were running toward you, but you only looked up at the sky, because the struggle you had given for years had brought you to this moment. The match had restarted, but regular time ended. The referee blew his whistle. Extra time. Now everyone was breathless. Legs were burning, but no one was giving up. Portugal was attacking. Spain was responding. The minutes were passing. Everyone was tired. Everyone was exhausted. But no one was taking a step back. Finally, the referee brought his whistle to his mouth once again. Extra time had ended too. For a moment, you couldn't understand what had happened. You had fought so much that you had forgotten the time. You looked around. Some players had collapsed to the ground. Some were looking up at the sky. Some were praying. Then the truth hit you. The World Cup final had gone to penalties. Now the fate of the entire match depended on a few penalty kicks. It was time for the penalties, and the eyes of the whole world were on you. The referee called the captains of both teams. The coin was tossed. The result was clear. Spain would take the first penalty, and you were first in line. Suddenly, your heart began to race, because you could not start badly. Missing the first penalty could put a huge burden on the whole team's shoulders. You took the ball in your hand and slowly started walking toward the penalty spot. The roar of the stadium filled your ears, but you could hear nothing. The only thing you heard was your heartbeat. Each step felt heavier than the last. You placed the ball on the ground. You set it on the penalty spot. The referee was saying something to you and the goalkeeper, but you couldn't hear anyone. There was only the ball. You took a deep breath. You stepped back. You started running. And the moment you struck it, you saw the goalkeeper dive to the opposite corner. The ball slid along the ground toward the left corner. Goal. 1-0. Spain had taken the lead. Your teammates were shouting toward you, but the job was not finished yet. Portugal scored. You scored. Portugal scored. Lamine Yamal scored. Portugal scored. You scored. Every shot raised the heartbeat even more. And then it came down to the final penalties. Your teammate stepped up to the ball. If he scored, the pressure would shift to Portugal. He took a deep breath. He ran. He shot. The post! The ball came back off the crossbar. Suddenly, the whole stadium was buried in silence. No, this couldn't be happening. Now everything depended on Portugal's final penalty. And then you saw him. Cristiano Ronaldo, your idol, the hero of your childhood. He was walking to take Portugal's final penalty. The whole stadium rose to its feet. Ronaldo took the ball in his hand. He placed it on the penalty spot. He stepped back. He wiped his hands on his shorts. He took a deep breath. Then he started running. And he struck it. Top right corner. Goal. Portugal had won. Portugal was the World Cup champion. The Portugal fans had gone crazy. The players were running onto the pitch. Cristiano Ronaldo had disappeared among his teammates. Your teammates had collapsed to the ground. But you couldn't move. The trophy you had dreamed of for years had slipped out of your hands. Slowly, you dropped to your knees. Then you lay completely on the ground. You put your arm over your eyes. You didn't want anyone to see you. You were barely holding yourself back from crying. All the struggle you had given since childhood, your fisherman father, the streets of Barcelona, La Masia, injuries, the substitutes bench, Real Madrid, the Champions League, the World Cup. Everything was passing before your eyes. And in the end, you had lost. You didn't even have the strength to get up from the ground. It felt like minutes had passed. Then you heard a voice coming from nearby, calm, familiar, and a voice that had motivated you for years whenever you heard it. "Hey, kid!" You slowly lifted your head. He was standing in front of you, Cristiano Ronaldo. But there was no prideful celebration on his face. There was respect. Cristiano smiled slightly. "You played well." You couldn't say anything. Your throat was tight. Cristiano crouched down beside you. Then he placed his hand on your shoulder. "You know, I couldn't win the World Cup for years either. I cried too. I lost too. I listened to people say that I was finished too." Then he looked into your eyes. "This is football. Today you lost, but you have many years ahead of you. One day you will win this trophy too." Cristiano stood up. Then he took off the jersey on his back and handed it to you. "This is yours now." For a moment, your breath stopped. The man you had admired as a child was now standing in front of you and giving you his jersey. Cristiano started walking. After taking a few steps, he returned to his teammates, and you were left staring at the number 7 jersey in your hands. You had lost the World Cup. But at that moment, you understood that this story had never been about trophies. This story was about a little boy who dreamed and never gave up. And your story had not ended here. On the contrary, your story was only just beginning.